saw me kind of struggle to get up. I was in Jackson Hole yesterday, and I was with a guy, and he said, let's go climb this little ski hill. So I said, yeah, that's great, let's go do that. So living in Florida, it's obviously flat. So the first this is 6:30 in the morning, the first probably 200 yards, I'm like, I'm not gonna make this thing, and I'm in relatively good shape. So I make it all the way top. Coming down, it was so steep, you pretty much have to run. So I'm like, you know what, I'm doing okay. I cycle and stuff. The more I go on throughout the day, my quads just keep tightening up. So if I'm up here training, that's the deal. Look, it is great to be in your guys' midst for a couple reasons. First of all, I love being around entrepreneurs. I love being around people who are taking a risk, who have a dream, and who are pursuing it. And in fact, you'll learn tonight a little bit. The company that I work for started out in 1973 with a $5,000 loan from his father. Today, over those 42 years, over that time period, we have managed, I think it's the latest number I just saw was $33 billion worth of assets over that whole time period. So I've had the privilege of working for this company, which is really a family-owned business for the last 18 years. So I highly value being with the group, and I look forward to hearing from you as well. The other thing is, as Patrice mentioned, I did grow up I actually was born in California, lived in Tigard, then moved to Eugene. My dad was a physician, was at OHSU, and then really grew up in Roseburg, Oregon. And then as a junior in high school, my parents moved to Chicago. We went out to Chicago. And I actually did come back. So my wife and I then ended up in Lake Oswego for about 5 years, then in Southern California, and now we've been in Orlando for the last 12 years. All right, so a couple little facts about Orlando. First, a funny story. So my daughter was actually born St. Vincent's, is it right? Yeah, so that's where my daughter was born, and my son was born down in California. So they're now in 8th grade and 7th grade, but this must have been, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. So I live in Orlando. It's actually a little community called Winter Park. And so we were driving out to the hilly area outside of Orlando. So we go up this hill, and I hear my kids in the back, "Oh, Dad, this is so fun. We're going up a mountain." And my wife and I are like, oh my gosh, we clearly need to get them back to the Pacific Northwest so they can see mountains. So here's a question for you. What's the highest elevation in Florida? 350? You nailed it. 345 feet. And I will promise you, we were not on the 345 feet incline. So whatever it was a dinky little hill that my kids thought was a mountain. Here's another thing is, so of course living here, it rains obviously, right? What do you think where does it rain more? Here or in Orlando? Orlando. Yeah, it's like, I think it's like 51 inches a year or something like that, and I think you guys are, I don't know, 47 or something like that. So anyways, I come from Orlando, although I clearly am from the Pacific Northwest. So let me tell you, I am I just started a coaching program with Patrice. I'm actually, I think it's my responsibility to take the first 2 chapters, and then we've got a coaching session. So I can't vouch for him on the coaching side yet, but he has been at my house, and I very much look forward to learning his principles and the things that they ultimately teach in BE, or Biblical Entrepreneurship. So let me take you back and give you a little bit of background on what we do as a company, where I have been from a career perspective, and then I'll talk to you about a situation that quickly changed my perspective on things, how I took that, hopefully, and time to refocus, and then just what I've actually seen in a very short time period by making some of these changes. So real fast, I went to college in Chicago, worked at a mutual fund company for a couple years, Van Kampen, don't know if you've ever heard of it. And then ultimately moved to CNL, which is where I work today. I've been there for 18 years. What we do at CNL is essentially we're an investment management company, specifically alternative investments. So there's 2 sides to CNL. One is the side, well, let me start with my side. My side is we raise all the capital. We go through, have you guys seen commercials for Ameriprise Financial Advisors? A lot of these you may not know, LPL, but these are broker dealers that have financial advisors who ultimately work with retail clients, investing in their portfolios and helping them retire. So we represent a product type that hopefully they put into their clients' portfolios. So as clients, you would send us capital. We'd then send the capital to the other side of CNL, which would go buy assets and then manage those assets. And then typically in the investments we have more dividend type investments, and we would send out checks to all of our investors. So that's what we've been doing for 42 years. I have been responsible for the last 9 years, up to about 6 weeks ago, for all of the capital raising efforts. So to give you an example, last year alone we raised $1.5 billion worth of capital. To give you some perspective, the average check that we get invested into our funds was $35,000. So you can imagine how many investors, how many physical checks, or whether it's physical or not, writing to invest in these types of alternative investments. So from a career perspective, got into the organization, moved up rather quickly, and from a worldly perspective, you'd go, oh man, you're making a name for yourself. Ended up as president of CNL Securities, I believe I got the math right, at 32. So responsible for, $1.5 billion capital raise a year. Underneath me was marketing. We had the sales organization, which is about 65 people, compliance, operations, all that kind of stuff. So from a worldly perspective, hey, Jeff, you're doing a great job. Making good money, and so I mean that's kind of where I was at. Went back, got an MBA, and that kind of stuff. So go back to let's see here, December of 2013, and I'll kind of paint the picture for you. So in that year, my wife and I decided to buy a new house. Not even because we really wanted a new house. We just felt like it was what we were supposed to do. It's a whole long story. 9 months of absolute hell trying to buy this house. It was a short sale. So we ended up thinking we got it. We sold our house, the first house, again, which we were very content to be there. Literally, I think it was on the market for 3 days, and it sells. And I think a day later we find out, the house we were going to get fell through. So we end up in apartment for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. So you got that, and it was a battle. I mean, it cost me, unfortunately I had somebody who helped me out, so it would have cost me, if they charged me, $125,000 in legal fee just to buy this house. There was bankruptcies, first mortgage, second mortgage, it was nasty. So anyways, come to December, we were just moving into the house. I found there was a call from a doctor who was questioning whether my wife had cancer. I find out my mom and dad of 46 years, they're going to get divorced. There's like 10 things that just keep lining up. Ultimately, I was having serious back problems, and I've been fighting that on and off for that whole year. It would get bad, it would get better, it would get bad, and then about literally in the middle of the move, I go out and I'm doing some core exercises, and I come back from that session. And it was like somebody had just hit me with a Mack truck. I mean, I just sat out in the driveway and I'm just like, oh. I walk inside, my wife's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't know, I just did something. So for the next 7 days, I'm in so much pain, I don't sleep. They, by the way, up to this point, they had just injected me twice with steroids in my lower back to try to, get the inflammation down so I don't have to have surgery. It's so bad, they end up putting more steroids into me orally. They have me on Vicodin, you name it. I'm sleeping, an hour or two a night, something like that. I wake up one night and I'm like, Shelly, my wife, you got to take me to the emergency room. This is so bad. I literally am all fours in the back of the minivan. Every turn, it was just like, oh. I get there, they give me morphine, doesn't touch it. So anyways, I go on and end up having back surgery 7 days later. Mind you, during this time, literally, and it sounds crazy, I'm feeling the strength in my lower body go bye-bye. It was starting to the point where I try to walk upstairs and was like, man, this is getting hard to walk upstairs. This foot and leg go numb, which it's actually still numb to this day. So it was an unbelievably intense time. So I go have surgery. Thank the Lord. Actually, it was a really neat story. I met the surgeon on a flight 6 months prior and got to know him, and actually had sent him an email when this got really bad. Because on the flight, he's like, don't have surgery, you don't need it. He goes, you'll know when you need it. So, and I did know. So anyways, I emailed the guy, and this is a doctor. He emailed him, and he emailed me back. He actually flies back. He's on vacation in Colorado. He flies back to do emergency surgery on me, which is crazy. Come to find out, this guy is one of the renowned surgeons, and he's flying all over the country, to Europe, doing these. And this was all just happenstance. Probably more than happenstance, but I met the guy on an airplane ride. So I have surgery. Pain goes away. I'm now dealing with having surgery. I have surgery on a Friday. On Tuesday, guess what I do? I go back to work. Because that's who I am, I work. Well, a week and a half later, it's like, no, this isn't quite working, because I'm still not sleeping. Obviously, my body is still trying to heal. And so I finally, my wife was like, you're an idiot, stay home. No, I can do it. And I finally talked to my boss, the CEO, and then HR, and I'm like, I just can't do this, I gotta work from home. So it all culminates on this night. I go to bed, again, struggling to sleep. So I was taking a bunch of medicine to try to sleep. I'm asleep for about an hour and a half. And I wake up and just drenched. Drenched. I'm shaking. I'm thirsty. I just can't quelch it. And the overarching feeling, and I can't, you just have to take my word for it, was as if my body was, and I literally told my wife, it was just shutting down. And I thought, literally, it would just shut down, and I was just going to pass away. So my wife was actually sick. She was upstairs, so I walked upstairs, I guess. I'm like, Shelley, you got to come down here. We got to pray real fast, because I'm just not feeling right. So, my wife prays, nothing happens, and I'm like, you need to call the paramedics. Of course, she's freaking out, going, is this guy having a heart attack, or whatever it is. Paramedics come, and picture yourself, they put me on a stretcher, and they're wheeling me out head first. And I go out the front door, and it's a foreign new house. My kids, thank the Lord, are asleep upstairs, which normally they wake up at a drop of a hat, because you got these big old clod boots that are coming in. But the feeling was, I'm going to never see this house again, which, in the scheme of things, who cares? I may never see my wife again. I may never see my kids again. Now, maybe an irrational thought, but it was as real as it has ever felt to me in my life. It was horrifying. I get in the ambulance, and this whole time, again, I'm a tough guy, driven. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm totally fine. You need to just let me go back. I'm actually getting mad at the guy. And he goes, look, I'm 40, you're 40. This is at the time, a couple of years ago. He goes, it's not normal to feel the way that you feel. I'm like, all right. Well, there was a moment of time, this is where stuff starts to get a little bit weird. There's a moment in time, so I'm sitting there, and you're sitting in this ambulance, and the doors are closed. And come to find out, I go into kind of la-la land. I don't know that at this point. So the overarching feeling I had was complete aloneness, to the point of absolute, almost paranoia. And said another way, it was almost the absence of God, and it was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. Anyways, I kind of come in and out of that, go to the emergency room. Again, I'm actually doing fine. I'm like, I'm totally fine. They're taking all my vitals, doing all this stuff, and they're like, yeah, you can go home if you want. But they didn't really want me to go home. I want to go home. And I won't tell you all the things that transpired there. That's for my wife someday to tell you. But basically, there was about a 4-hour window where I remember little bits of it, but I'm kind of in la-la land. And really, it was absolute paranoia and absolute fear. Does anybody know what was happening? You may have a guess what was happening?
Panic attack. Stress. Anxiety attack?
Yeah, that's what they thought at first. Yeah, it could be. So, no, come to find out what had happened was, has anybody heard of something called steroid psychosis? So you've heard of it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Have you really?
Yeah, I was counseling with the guy that was having roid rages right in front of him.
So from what I understand, have you ever heard of roid rage? Which is the other, from what I understand, you have that side, which people get highly aggressive. Well, I was on the complete other side of the spectrum where I wanted out of this body, and it was just, I couldn't even tell you, it was just pure angst, paranoia. It was hell. So they ended up giving me some medicine, and obviously I went to sleep, but it took me probably, now I was very coherent from that moment on, but probably 6 to 9 months of just my body re-regulating all my hormones and that kind of stuff. So I had, which I've never experienced before, massive anxiety for about 6 to 9 months. But what it did for me was, and it was brutal in the time period. It literally, when I came home from the emergency room, I mean, it sounds crazy for me to say this out loud. I slept upstairs, one, because I didn't want to sleep downstairs in the bedroom because it was too freaky to me, because that's where it all had taken place. I literally couldn't sleep because I was afraid that I was going to go back into that spot and actually hurt my kids or something, because I didn't remember what I did, which my wife was like, no, that's the last thing, that you're not going to hurt anybody. You were so, you were almost like in the fetal position. But here's what it did for me is, the metaphor I'll give you is, it was as if I was running on a treadmill for 20 years of my career. And it wasn't that I ever had this, like I never had an aspiration to be the president of C&L Securities. That's just not the way I'm driven. The way I'm driven is just do the best you can wherever you're at, learn, and whatever happens, happens. So I'm running on this metaphorical treadmill, and again, my personality along these 20 years is I'm going to go get back and get what's called a certified financial planner while I'm working. I'm going to go get an MBA while I'm working. We have 2 kids. We move. And it's just like, yeah, just keep throwing all this stuff. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And then all of a sudden, the last minute, this baseball bat goes wham and knocks me off this treadmill. And I'm literally on my back. And in that moment, in the hospital and whatnot thereafter, it's like, wait, I don't even know if I can get back on the treadmill. I mean, I don't know physically, because at this point, I can't even do a calf raise in I can't even do this. My muscle, the nerves have been damaged so much, which obviously they're better today. And so that started this whole process, which is obviously what Patrice is going to talk about for me. So, by the way, he gave me credit saying that I stepped down. And I did do all that. But it wasn't probably out of me being strong. It was actually out of a reality over a 2-year time period. It's not the right thing to do, but it was out of pure weakness. Now, when I made the decision, it was out of strength. But I don't want to take more credit than what's due, because it was ultimately out of weakness that I got to that point. So, come to the kind of refocus and refining. What I ended up doing was asking the questions, very, very basic questions. What matters? What's my purpose? What are my passions? And what was interesting, and this isn't all necessarily linear the last 2 years, but little pieces would start to fill in. So I remember I was sitting actually in our living room, and I get this investment opportunity. And inside this investment opportunity is a CD to watch, what this investment's about. Well, it turns out it is an investment in low-income housing. And the little DVD that I watched was actually a resident of one of these low-income housing deals. And they talk about what it was like living at this facility prior to this company coming in, taking over the management, infusing some capital in it, and then getting more residents. And basically what they're talking about is, you know what, they gave me dignity back. They treated me as individuals. I actually want to have people come to my house now. And I'm sitting there watching this. It was like these lights are just going off, and you're like, wait a second. So here I am, a potential investor. I can get a return, whatever the number is, and in that process, I actually can do good above and beyond just owning a real estate on the restaurant side or whatnot. And so it was in that moment where it hit me. It's like, I realized maybe one of my passions is actually a term called impact investing. And so that was one little nugget over this time period. Well, fast forward, ultimately, where the journey I'm on right now is how do I leverage what I've done for 20 years, which is essentially raise capital. In the last 9 years as president, we raised about $9 billion worth of capital. How do I leverage that? How do I leverage my passion, which impact investing with a purpose is one. How do I bring that and my purpose together? So ultimately, what I did is in the midst of all of this turmoil, as I'm trying to get my bearings straight and research all this, I actually go to my boss. This was this was probably a year and a half ago, and said, here's where I'm at. Which is a real, I didn't have to, but because that could have been a thing where he goes, look, you're out of here. But I told him, I said, I'm really evaluating what I want to do. Fortunately, I work for a great company, and he's like, look, you keep doing your deal, and let's see what transpires. And one of the exercises I did in that time period, and it sounds really basic, but I'd encourage you to do this. Somebody had told me about it, was literally on a piece of paper, divide it in two. And on one side you say, what do I know to be true? And then on the second side you put, what do I believe to be true? So as I looked at my situation, there were some very blatant things that I know to be true. One, I want to be a better husband to my wife. Another one is, did I say that right? Yeah. Another one has to do with parenting. I've got two kids. I don't want to regret in 6 years from now when my kids go to college of, oh my gosh, I wasn't there. Because to be honest with you, there's a little bit of regret or the first half of their time with us. On that side, you write stuff like that. On the other side, you write, what do I believe to be true? So as I'm going through this process, I believe I want to start a business. I'm not for certain yet, but I believe I do. I believe I want to start something with impact investing. I don't know for certain yet, but I think. So I make a list of stuff. What I end up doing is I put that on the counter in my bathroom, and you just look at it. I mean, I probably looked at it for a month. And as you're processing, you start to, over time, go, yep, that I believe to becomes more clear. Yeah, I don't know that one is really where I'm at. Yeah, I think that one is. And that was one of the things that really helped me get the confidence to ultimately walk in to my boss, which was in June, and go, you know what? I think I'll be glad to help in the transition, but I think I'm done. I need to do something else. Ironically, and Patrice knows my boss, he when I first talked to him, he's like, all right, well, why don't you take 6 weeks and come back and let's figure out a role that you could do. So as I'm leaving, he goes, yeah, and so let's see, why don't you come back July 15th? And he goes, but I'm not so sure I want to make a change. And I'm like, wait, I don't think this is your decision. Anyways, we go to Europe, I come back and decide, you know what, I'm going to move forward with this. So I actually worked on creating a job at CNL that could align my own interest with the interest of CNL. So it doesn't really matter what all that is for this discussion, but ultimately I'm doing a role that is very critical to CNL from a growth perspective, but it's growing my skill set. And my goal is over the next 12 months to do that for CNL, put together a business plan. I'll probably come back to CNL. I've already told them and said, look, here's what I'd like to do with impact investing. If you want to do that with me, wonderful. Let's see if we can work it out. If not, I'm going to be sitting maybe at the table with you all starting my own business. Here's ultimately what I want to share. I really, and this is going to sound hokey, I really believe this idea of purpose and passion is literally a matter of life and death. Now, it may not always be physical, but it sure can be emotional. You look at my dad's a physician. Look, and you all know these examples. He's a cancer doctor. How many times he would come home and tell us stories, unfortunately, so-and-so passed away, whatever the age, 75 years old, 80 years old. And then you come to find out, and then the spouse dies 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, very close by. Why? Because they lose that sense of purpose. There's hundreds of examples of that. And so I really would say, with all sincerity, the more you spend time on this, literally is life and death, some physical, some probably emotional. But here's what I've noticed in literally the last 2 months, and let's pray that it continues. I have first of all, it was like a massive, massive weight was taken off my shoulders. Massive weight. Because what's happened is what I was doing before, my purpose and passion were just too far apart. So I had, obviously, a ton of weight was lifted. My energy level went up tremendously. My creativity went up. Clarity. I have people at work, but like a guy that used to report to me, he's like, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen you so clear in your thinking and what you're doing." So I can just tell you, at least in the last 2 months, you got to remember the last 2 years were not fun for me. So to see that dramatic of a change that quickly was nothing I was expecting. But I really believe it's that critical, and it shows you how it can make such a big difference by really thinking about your passion, your purpose, and then ultimately your skills. Look, in closing here, one of my passions, which is not necessarily aligned with work, although I'm trying to figure out how to do that, is I've been going into the prison systems for probably 22 years. I've been in probably 5 or 6 states, been in tons of maximum security prisons. And and there's really great stories I can tell you, and then there's some really depressing. Usually they're more great stories. But this whole idea of purpose, I'll never forget, I was in Chicago, Illinois. I was in a youth prison. I've only been in one, that was the only one. And I am talking to as young as 8 years old, they're in these prisons. I remember talking to, there's 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and you talk to these kids, you could barely talk to them because you know what their perception was? I'm not going to live to the past 21. I literally, that is their perspective. Try talking to somebody who has no purpose other than going, I'm going to probably die before I'm 21. It was the most discouraging thing. On the other side, in fact, Patrice, I think, we're going to go out together. There's a guy in Colorado, and I can give you plenty of examples of these, where you will meet people who are, and typically I go in with the men, who they are like oak trees. They're never getting out of the prison system. And you see that the purpose that and a lot of these guys go, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And the amount of passion and meaning that they live within the prison system makes us on the outside look like we don't know what the heck we're doing. And so there's even an example in what is a horrible situation, even in the midst of being behind bars. These guys are living out a purpose. And so you can see, you can either take this thing and define purpose in a positive way and run with it, or if you don't, it could easily take you the other way. So look, I'd encourage you, think about what are your skills, what is your passion, what is your purpose. I also would encourage you, do that little exercise. Force yourself to write this stuff down. What do I know to be true about myself, and then what do I believe? And what I would hope is that we all walk away from here, myself included, and we all ultimately make that decision to say, I'm going to be very deliberate about what my purpose is. And obviously, classes like Patrice and they put on will really help you define that. And so even for me, I think I've got more and more clarity, but I'm going to spend, 9 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is, redefining that for myself. So with that, glad to answer any questions you might have, or did anybody resonate with what I said, or you go, that's a bunch of hooey. Any thoughts? Yeah.
Did you ever create a personal mission statement for your life?
So, being in the business world, we do a lot of that kind of stuff, obviously business. So I have, but it needs to be redone. Yeah, it really does. And that's one of the things that I want to do with Patrice. Yeah.
Have you ever had a coach prior to
Patrice?
I have. Phenomenal. I mean, it's a I mean, you all know the analogies. Tiger Woods, well, not today, but at one point was the best in the world. He had a coach. So yes, I've had a coach. And you know what's funny is just having somebody to bounce an idea off, and you hear you say it, and you're like, and no offense to coaches, and they wasn't anything brilliant. I just talked to them, and it's like half of it is just them getting it out of me. So yeah, and especially in C&O, we do a lot of that. That's one of the benefits of being in a more of a corporate setting. There's a bunch of resources for the development and that kind of thing. But absolutely, I would recommend coaching, which is why I'm doing it. Any other thoughts, comments? I tell you what's cool for me is, so I hear you guys talk about triple bottom lines. So one of the things that I'm also attracted to Patrice is, so I just told you I have a passion for raising capital and potentially deploying it in impact type investments. So to see, we've talked about, is there a way that you leverage my relationships and my 20 years of raising capital, and can we almost create funds where I go, with a team, go raise capital, and then we're able to invest that capital into businesses like your own, especially those that have an impact above and beyond just pure profit. So if we can figure that out someday, hopefully he'll have a whole lot more capital to bring to you all. And so anyways, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to hearing your discussion.
James, thank you so much.